If I were to repeat my mantra to you that we don't sell to companies, we sell to people, I'm sure your first reaction would be, well, duh. I won't hold that against you. I actually had to think about it for a while when I wrote it as the first line of my book. But let me ask you this. If we sellers are so aware of and attuned to the reality that our path to winning business goes through human beings liking and sponsoring what we sell, then why is it that so many of us struggle with buyer conflict, objections, and even dislike? Well, the number one enemy of all sales conversations is emotional disconnect. So as the first of a 5-part series on my 5 elite sales habits to building and winning with champions, I'm going to share with you the single most impactful knowledge that you need to have about the people you're selling to. And this one thing alone could be the key to unlocking your mastery of the human cell. Normal is overrated. I swear, as a father sometimes, I just want my kids to hear my voice and do what I ask. But I know that's not as simple as I'd like it to be because my children are human beings. And those little humans make almost all of their decisions based on emotion. It's just the stage of their brain formation. Now, luckily in business, we don't sell to children and adults. Well, they're clearly too mature to be emotional, right? Well, I'll never forget the meeting when I finally learned about the power of emotion in a buying decision. And yes, it was an adult we were selling to. I was brand new to a team I was taking over, and I was invited to go meet the vice president of operations at a multi-billion-dollar financial services company. I was told that we had spent months in the deal and built multiple champions around a hugely successful proof of concept and a strong business case that their team built with us. We were a unicorn application automation product, and this company's main source of revenue was their online application. The stars couldn't have been more aligned. So while my rep told me that this meeting was about aligning with the VP on the final paper process, I quickly learned that we weren't so aligned. 2 minutes into me kicking off the meeting, I received the strongest emotional reaction I'd ever gotten from a buyer. He was furious that not only we were there to talk about a purchase, but that his team would have wasted his time. You see, even though everything about our value proposition and return on investment made complete logical sense to both us and their application team, this key champion target, this authority over the bigger operation, told us in no uncertain terms that if what we sold didn't solve the compliance and audit problems that were on his back, there was no way he would spend another minute talking about the productivity gains of our application automation. I want you to consider this. As a human, there's a difference between us understanding something versus truly connecting to it. Even 2 minutes into our discussion, he totally understood what we did and the value that we could deliver. But what I learned that day is that unless we sellers intentionally connect that value to the emotional desires of a buyer, then there's no way that just achieving intellectual understanding will motivate a person's bias for action. And I'll explain what feels like a complicated sales challenge with some really simple science. I want you to learn what I call the buyer decision path. You see, every buyer, every human being actually reacts to new opportunities and makes decisions along the same subconscious mental path. And I want you to write this down, as this could be the most transformational understanding that will impact the rest of your sales career. And that's survive, thrive, think. The buyer decision path of survive, thrive, think is an involuntary, subconscious mental sequence that science says happens with every person in every new situation where they're faced with a new decision. And it couldn't be simpler to understand. And it goes like this. A buyer's first reaction when it gets our prospecting message, our cold call, the start of our discovery meeting, is one where their survive and thrive brain automatically engages. The survive and thrive part of our brain is where our emotional functions live. They're actually in the back, middle part of our brain. So when we sellers use those prospecting approaches that fail to disarm a buyer's survival brain, we get that fight or flight reaction and we just get ignored. When our discovery and presentations fail to connect with what a buyer is trying to survive and the outcomes that define how they might thrive, well then, we just forced a buyer to emotionally disconnect. So when I tell you that emotional disconnect is the number one enemy of all sales conversations, I'm saying that it's usually our fault. Survive, Thrive, Think tells us that the thinking or intellectual cognitive brain is actually last in the mental sequence of how we humans react and make decisions. So when we sellers lead with immediately trying to intellectually connect to a buyer's thinking brain before we've emotionally connected to their survive and thrive emotional brain, that's when we start getting into problems, conflicts, and objections. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Well, it's actually just basic science. You see, our thinking brain, which is right up here in the front of our head, has been around for about 200,000 years. Long time, right? Well, the problem is that our survive and thrive emotional brain, well, it's been around for over 2 million years. So it's fair to say that they've accumulated a lot of power and authority over the rest of the brain. I guess we could think of our survive and thrive brain as the primary champion target of a buyer's mind. And now that you're aware of this buyer decision path, survive, thrive, think, it's time to ask yourself, are you selling back to front or are you selling front to back? If in your sales conversations, presentations, demos, it's not uncommon for you to be getting objections to your message, disconnects, and even conflict, then chances are that you're selling front to back. Quick pause. Now, if you're getting value, please hit subscribe, tap like, and drop a comment so more people can find this and I can help more people. Now let's get back to it. Ask yourself, as you're initiating these dialogues, how quickly are you going right to the buyer's intellectual thinking brain? And this could be, rather than a natural two-way conversation, you typically lead a drumbeat of one-sided interrogation questions. Or your conversations and presentations start with pitching your message, your differentiators, ROI, brag points. You push the study that your company just published onto your buyer immediately. You lead with your perspective on the alternative solutions in the market, or worse, you're actually starting conversations with total strangers by challenging their point of view, their beliefs, in efforts to get them to see your point of view and miraculously come around because it's just so compelling. Or conversely, if your approach is more typically framing those conversations around the problems that your solution could solve for, the outcomes that a buyer would care about relevant to what you sell, then chances are that you just might be unconsciously competent at leading buyers toward an emotional connection. You sell back to front. It's just a routine habit in your natural sales approach. And by the way, if you really understand the simplicity but undeniable scientific truth of survive, thrive, think, and I want you to really listen here, your mechanical approach of whether you ask a question here or position a statement there, look, it's just not what you should be focused on. In fact, trying to follow too structured of a process actually puts your mind on the process and less on the person. And so it's really simple. Whether your instincts in the moment, based on the information being shared and the flow of the conversation, lead you to ask a question or position a statement, all that matters is that you're connecting to that person's natural decision path. And remember, there's a difference between understanding and connection. If you're not disarming your buyer's survival brain by identifying yourself as a potential friend who could solve the problems they care about, and you're not connecting what you sell to their thrive brain, these priority future outcomes that they desire, then the end result will most likely be emotional disconnect. No matter how clearly you articulate what you do and how you think you're different, what you think your value is, no matter how well your buyer intellectually understands all of that, real emotional connection will never happen until you master the habit of connecting what you sell to the buyer. And that's not solution here and buyer here and forcing them to figure out the connection. That's connecting the puzzle for them. Just understand that creating emotional connection as a foundational habit in your sales routine is far more natural than it is unnatural. It's actually our own fear responses and insecurities that make us go right to the safe zone. If I just tell them what we do, how we think we're different, and throw out our value metrics, I'll be in control. I'll be able to teach them a better way to think about things. Well, in sales, there's a big difference between safe and productive. But trust me, it's not that hard to change this sales habit. Just follow what I call the sales golden rule. Sell to others as you'd want to be sold to yourself. Before we'll ever be willing to spend our intellectual energy and focus on what someone else is trying to sell to us, we need to answer the predominant emotional connection question. What does this have to do with me? Your path to mastering the human cell is leading a routine habit of emotional connection to the buyer's natural decision path. Survive, thrive, think. If there's other enterprise sales topics you want to hear about, share in the comments below, and I'd like you to answer this question. If we were to ask buyers about the sales conversations they're having today, what do you think they would say are the worst sales habits they see? Friends, if I'm helping you in any way, be sure to bump that like, subscribe, and then click on the screen right now to watch another video helping you to master the human cell and elite level sales strategy. Thanks for watching.